Troy Miller is the president and CEO of the National Religious Broadcasters, and here in studio. Troy, a pleasure to have you, not on Zoom, to actually be in Israel, to talk about what's happening in the United States and why you're here now. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. And it's great to be here in studio and to be in Israel for this week. And as you said, not on Zoom. It's nice to have those direct conversations.
Troy, your plate is full. You're doing a phenomenal job, but every day, I am sure, is a challenge. As we're sitting here, New York is going to be going to elections for a new mayor. There's been a lot going on around what happened with Charlie Kirk, much happening around what's happening with Tucker Carlson. The list is long. Where do you begin when you're looking each day and deciding what do I have to get my hands on and out to my partners through the NRB?
Yeah, you're right. There's so much going on in the news cycle right now. Between Charlie Kirk, between elections, not only in New York, we're looking at Minneapolis. We could have 4 or 5 cities in the U.S. today that could be run by basically a combination of radical progressives that have an Islamic bent to them. And so that's a frightening thought across the country. So look, we have a number of things we get out to people to talk about the immediate, but we also can't lose sight of the long term here. I think that's what's happened too many times in Christian media. We soundbite for today. We're constantly reacting, but we also are working very hard on developing a proactive plan that addresses this in the long run and not just the short term.
You bring up a very important point, and that has to do with some of the Muslims in the community that are running, but they're not representative of all Muslims. Everyone thinks that when they think sometimes of politics in the Muslim community, that sometimes it's just the radical. I think we need to bring up that issue here and now because you're not seeing the other voice.
Yeah, there are a lot of moderates in the Muslim world, and a lot of them. Look, this week I had a conversation and talked about a gentleman who's, said, look, I'm a fundamentalist in the way that I believe in the fundamentals of Islam, but I'm not a radical. There's a difference between believing in the fundamentals of Islam and having a respect and a tolerance for other religions than there is the radicals who have no respect and no tolerance and only really operate on this dominance kind of theory.
When you look at the Mamdani elections, and that in particular, the first night of the debate was so much dedicated to Israel issues, Jewish issues. You never would normally see that as the core and principled questions that are going to be asked. Why? Why now is this such the focus?
Well, look, this is the key topic in the world right now when it comes to foreign politics. We have all the economic things that are going on, but this even, really is over the top of that because of the war here and because the radicals have made it the top topic. That's one of the issues, though, Felice, that the radicals have made this a top topic for the world. And they won't let it get off because they see it as an opportunity to continue to villainize Israel as the war goes on.
Is it aimed at the Jews, or are the Christians in trouble too?
I think 2 different issues. I think it's one primarily aimed at the Jews. This is an anti-Semitic, anti-Zionist movement that goes there. It's aimed at the Christians because the Christians are the largest supporters of Israel around the world in any one country. They certainly are in America. America still holds, in our latest, kind of polling, 85 to 90%, favorable view amongst the Christian community. So the fringes sometimes get the more of the loud voices out there, and they're getting more mainstream media coverage, but there's not been a major dent in the Christian community.
Speaking about the Christian community, let's shift to what's happening in Nigeria. It's in the news. A lot of Americans aren't even familiar with what's happening to the Christians there. All of a sudden, we see President Trump taking some bold moves and action. What's it all about?
Yeah, and look, first of all, I want to thank the president for doing that and for declaring Nigeria a country of particular concern. That has a deep meaning in the State Department. It's how we deal with Nigeria, how much funds can flow to Nigeria, and it puts the pressure on the Nigerian government to step in. Look, we have radical Islam that has moved into the northern part of Nigeria. And as they became, as happens in so many places, they became the majority in the north. They are using that majority to drive out any of the remaining Christians. And by radical, these are radical, evil, violent factions of Islam. So they have slaughtered thousands upon thousands of Christians over the last several years, and this year in particular. Villages have been burnt to the ground. People have given 24 hours notice. Get out of Nigeria, get out of these areas, or until we come tomorrow, there will be a mass grave. And mass graves are what's happened. So this is a major concern for us because we see a growing anti-Christian movement around the world. Right now, India is very dangerous. The nationalist Hindu movement has had a major crackdown and chilling on Christianity. Of all countries that we thought was in an ally to us, South Korea right now has had a communist socialist government change in South Korea. And we have a pastor there, a major South Korean pastor who's been put in jail. We have a number of churches that we've talked to that are very concerned about their ability to communicate openly within the country. So there's a lot going on around the world. And this issue needs to be addressed. And again, thank the administration for doing it at this time.
Foreign policy is playing a strong role in President Trump's base now. It's part of everything he's involved in. Ironically, he didn't really run on that. He really didn't want to get involved in wars. And yet we see what happened between Israel and Gaza. But you don't see in the media, for the most part, and to the American people, almost anything that you're talking about. I would say that it takes up much less room. It's the old question of why.
Well, look, there's a lot of media has become more opinionated. It's become more agenda driven. It's much more propaganda. It's also about, market driven, about how to meet certain audiences that they feel are their audiences. And so you don't want to give information that would alienate that audience. So there's a lot going on, especially in the American media landscape. And it's shifting because we also have a shifting distribution platform out there. And media had such a stranglehold on America. Every household now, you have the internet. Now you have not only do you have mainstream media out there, but you have hundreds of influencers and other organizations, and you have a big rise of independent media and small media that's going on. So that I think that is the thing we're working against on the Christian side. Look, mainstream media has no love for Christianity, and it has no love for the Jewish people or for Israel. And so they suppress every story that's out there.
You can't open a paper without seeing something lately about Tucker Carlson or Candace Owens, and the list goes long. What is the dynamic? There is a change in the rhetoric.
There's a change in some of the rhetoric, especially amongst two people there that have very big followings, very powerful followings, and look, I'm one of those, and we're looking for more and more. I read a great article today that actually outlined the message of here's how the money came from Qatar, and Qatar funded this, and then through this NGO and that NGO. A lot of it is, all organizations, and ever since Tucker left Fox, Tucker's been on his own, and he's got a big media organization now, and that media organization requires advertising and funding and all those. I would hope that we would have more journalism and more ethics and more morality in reporting today, but the fact is we don't.
Do you think Qatar is buying up people?
I think Qatar is buying a lot of institutions around the world, and particularly in the U.S.
It's a problem. And the reality is that it's very difficult to make politically astute decisions if you have a double reason of a country operating multidimensionally. They're operating thinking, I can also fund what's happening and create chaos, and I can also say I'm going to create deals and be the good guy. That's what Qatar did. And they're really operating really in front of the world and getting away with it, what can be done?
Well, first of all, exposure has to be the number one. I mean, we have to get beyond the just conjecture that this is happening and do some real journalism to say, here's the facts behind it. So that because the real neat movement we have, and especially amongst the millennials and the Gen Zers, is when presented with the facts, they'll actually listen. They're hungry for more truth. NRB just finished up a study we did, survey with the Barna Group back in January of this year. And we found out that, look, that Gen Zers are flocking to Christian media. 64% of Gen Z, 58% of the millennials, Gen Y. And the number one reasons that they want encouragement, they want hope, but they also want to hear the truth. They want to know the truth. They realize that they have been propagandized against. They realize that they have been purposely fed misinformation for the fact to change their opinions and to shape their ideology. And they're really pushing back against that. So I think one of the things it's going to be is good, solid, true reporting and people getting out the facts. The other thing is we have to have a strategy to understand we're actually fighting a media battle. We're not fighting so much the battle of bullets and weapons as much as we are fighting a battle of information and a battle for the minds.
That is my pet peeve, as yours. And fighting to get truth out for people to understand what journalism is an uphill battle. Particularly today when you've had so much propaganda and a sea of influencers. And mind you, yes, there's a place for all of it, but to understand the difference between what journalism is and what influencers do. Do you struggle with this?
We struggle with it, and I think our industry certainly struggles with it. And I'm talking about the Christian media side of it. We struggle with it because, look, there was a poll recently. For years, they asked high school students, what did you want to be when you grow up? What's your career path? Doctors, lawyers, all the kind of normal things you think you'd hear. But the last 4 years, influencer has been the number one. And that's because today we're a society of so much instant gratification. We want everything now. We want it soundbite. We don't want to really do all the hard work.
And we want to get paid for doing it.
But that's the issue. We want to get paid doing it. And, you could be a popular influencer is about as much chance as you're going to be a quarterback for a major NFL team. People don't realize that it runs up, but what it has done, Felice, is it's destroyed some of our ability to have dialogue and to have debate and to actually talk and critique. And this was something I think Charlie Kirk recognized. He had to get out of just the digital world and get on the campuses. He had to get out there in person and actually look people in the eye, take their very tough questions, and then say to them, I disagree with you, but let me tell you why. But I still think you're a good guy. I think you're a nice person. Thank you for asking that question. But here's where I come from on this issue. And he knew to get out of all of that digital noise, he had to get on the campus. We have to remember at the end of the day, it's people that we're actually talking to. And as Christians, we are told to love our neighbors and to speak the truth in love. And not to speak the truth in, hate, and all we're trying to do is win a debate. We really are trying to love people and give people the best information to make the decisions. And we think that when they have that, they're going to make the right decisions for the most part.
When watching what happened when Charlie Kirk was murdered and the aftermath and the reaction from the young people, that really was, I don't think shocking, but I think people felt it was welcome. Did you feel that because there was such a rift between parties and really a lot of disgusting, there's no other way to say it, political backlash in the way people were dealing in politics, that we saw the young people coming out the way they were?
Yes. Yes. Clearly there's been such a divide. The gap between the two parties is now so wide. And clearly that was an issue. But I think really what happened with Charlie's murder, with his assassination, was they had heard for all these years, there are people on the right saying, we are radicalizing the left so severely that there's going to be violence. We saw it with all of the BLM riots and the things that went on there, and there was no real consequences for any of that. And then look, this year we've had at least a half a dozen instances across the country, including Charlie's murder, by radical transgender units, people from that side. And so I think everybody was saying this is going to happen, and they were like, oh, that's all conspiracy. But then when Charlie was actually assassinated, when Charlie Kirk, giving a speech there in Utah, was shot, and it's on camera when this actually happened, and they caught this person, I think the young people woke up and said, enough is enough. Enough is enough of what's going on here. And this is a problem because the left has been really taken over by the most radical part of its party. And that is something we're fighting against on the other side, on the GOP side. We can't let the radicals take over on either side.
Christian Media Conference is the reason that you were in Israel. Looking at the Christian media and how it's evolved and its relationship with Israel, how is it different today than looking back 20 years ago? And it has changed.
It has changed. Look, for a long time, Christians, as I said, have stood with Israel. NRB itself goes back 30 or 40 years to have two Israeli prime ministers who have addressed the association. And so there have been constant meetings and things. A lot of it centered around more high-level politics of supporting Israel, but most of it was all about tourism. Most of it was about getting Christians to the Holy Land, bringing people over, and that's all great. That's been great. But we've seen a real shift in today because I think we see, I think Christians more than ever see a tie between our two faiths. As anti-Semitism goes, so will anti-Christianity. As that grows, as Israel's right to self-government and to be here in the land goes, I think we're going to see more and more challenges around Christianity. So there's a real bond between us, and we have to build on that bond. That bond has to change it. It can't just be all about coming to the Holy Land and seeing the Holy Land experience. It has to be a mutual understanding. As Christians, look, we believe as Christians, we are grafted into the cultivated olive tree of Judaism. That's the way the Apostle Paul describes it in Romans. He says, we are grafted into the cultivated tree, the root. This is the root. If the root dies, the branches don't have a chance.
What's the strongest message you want to convey? And I mean journalistically. What's on your mind today when you walk in and you have to speak to a conference of people who are here from the Christian media? And we started this interview talking about so many issues. What's most important?
I think right now the most important thing to communicate is courage. Courage to do the right thing. Courage to speak up. Let your voice be heard. Courage to not get caught up in all of the name calling and the hate speech, and not to get caught up in revenge. Speak the truth. Be courageous. Be loving. That will win the day. Authenticity and the genuineness of people is going to win the day. That is what needs to happen in journalism. We need to get back to where we cover all of our sources. We know what we're doing. We're speaking the facts. We have that. And we need to get back to us as people to look at one another created in the image of God.
Troy Miller, President and CEO of the NRB. Looking forward to your remarks this week at the Christian Media Conference. But most important, thank you for joining me here and in person.
Thank you for having me.